And now, live from the studios of Freedom's Phoenix, Ernest Hancock.
From Philadelphia, we expect a declaration of independence.
Our rights are being threatened by a tyrant 3,000 miles away.
Would you tell me, please, Mr. Howard, why should I trade one tyrant 3,000 miles away for 3,000 tyrants 1 mile away? An elected legislature can trample a man's rights as easily as a king can. Mark my words. This war will be fought not on the frontier or on some distant battlefield, but amongst us, among our homes. Our children will learn of it with their own eyes. And the innocent will die with the rest of us.
Yep. The innocent will die with the rest of us. So we're doing the best we can to avoid it. You know, some people eagerly engage it, enjoy preparing for it so that they feel like they're being productive in their efforts. But, you know, it's a lot of times, like with the sovereign man, you know, what are we looking at? We're looking to just avoid it, to go somewhere else. You know, we don't have to be here. You know, there's a lot of, we have a lot of things that give us reason to hope. When we were supporting the revolutionaries, that how I don't know how else to describe them around Arabic-speaking countries, we created an Arabic translated Harria Phoenix, which is Freedom's Phoenix in Arabic. We have Twitters, Facebooks, all that kind of stuff. In just the past month, our Harria Phoenix Twitter account has over 2,100 followers. Now, Freedom's Phoenix Twitter has 3,500, but I mean, in a month, we have 2,100 from Arabia. You know, we have the Facebooks and Twitter accounts and so on, and we're trying to share with them with what we know, that this isn't about beating them with guns and bullets. It's about changing the way you perceive yourself, that you own yourself. All the other stuff comes after that. All the, how far are you willing to go? How are you willing to die? Are you willing to kill? Oftentimes I've found that people are, you have to really train yourself to want to project force. Then it's much easier to just be willing to advocate for an idea and to allow force to come upon you. Some people aren't built that way. They go, look, man, I don't want the kinetic military action coming through my flesh. You know, this is their new words now. They call it kinetic. Have you seen that, Dean? What they're calling
kinetic military force? It's not a war.
What the heck does that mean?
I think it has something to do with the
kinetic
momentum
energy
of history.
Yeah, you know, the kinetic. Seriously, who are the guys that make up this stuff? You know. So I'm really seeing this happen. In that scene that I played from The Patriot with Mel Gibson really makes a good point. It's like, look, man, you know, what's the difference? I'm going to trade this guy 3,000 miles away for rights-trampling legislature, you know, 1 mile away. You know, so, and the difference is what? It's a cultural thing. That's what we were talking to Simon Black about. I'm going, so we go somewhere. Now what? What makes them go, I'm going to invest 20 years of my life. I'm going to raise family. They're going to be ingrained in that culture. I have no problem going wherever freedom is, even another language for kids, grandkids. We were willing to go to New Zealand when our children were smaller. We're looking, and then it started to shift again. So I'm going, well, I'm not going there. You know, so it's a culture. What can we see? Well, here in America, it was understood that rights have to be defended. There has to be, for themselves and their state, the ability to say, no. All right. So they start passing legislation. Well, then we get into World War I. So how did that, I mean, immediately after they do the Dick Act, they start, you know, they took away that 9-month limitation thing. Got that? Okay, everything all set. We all legal now? Boom. We're going to Europe. The doughboys are coming.
Well, it wasn't 100% done yet after 1908 when they revoked key parts of the Dick Act, and they still had a lot of work to do. But the public was a little bit tired of it. They were already beginning to tire of this talk that Roosevelt had always given about, empire and America's place in the world. And, Americans typically, especially at that time, just wanted to be left alone. They wanted to keep their head down, plow their field, enjoy the fruits of their labor, and the rest of the world can burn in one big pile. They don't care. But then
you have to care. You're not allowed not to care.
Well, fate intervened, and something began to happen on our own borders that made them care, and it happened right down here near Arizona, and that was the Mexican Revolution. And, America was still fairly racist at that time, and they were concerned about the brown hordes fleeing the war in Mexico and coming up into the sparsely populated southwestern United States, Arizona, New Mexico, and actually taking it back. Talk of Reconquista was happening even in 1916. And it was that fear, and that fear was solidified with Pancho Villa's raid into the United States at Columbus, New Mexico, that caused this controversy called the Preparedness Controversy, which is what was talked about in Washington, and caused the new National Preparedness Act of 1916 to pass, which solidified all these reforms to the National Guard.
Okay, now wait a minute. When was the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, yeah. When was that?
1848, I believe. It was after the Mexican War.
Okay, so in 1840, so it's like 50 years later that they're doing, a little over 50 years, because before we had kind of, gave them 40 pieces of silver, and we just kind of took a bunch of Mexico.
Yeah.
And we had a guy sign, hey, man, right? And we had our troops in Mexico City. We're going, your signature, your brains on the document. That's how that went down. So, of course, certainly that generation, and even now, they're going, hey, man, you ripped us off. And we're like, hey, man, he signed it. So, this is still a controversial issue, but that's what they used in order while they're having their troubles on the border and so on. Well, that just played right in, too.
Oh, and some of the same characters were involved that got us into the Spanish-American War over in Cuba and in... can't think of it now. Those islands down there that we possess. But anyway... Puerto Rico, of course. But, it was Hearst newspapers and yellow journalism and his ability to channel public opinion and direct it that got us into that war. And it was that same...
you give me the pictures, I'll give you a war.
Yeah, that same monolith that got everyone concerned about Pancho Villa. Pancho Villa was our friend, as oftentimes people are initially our friend, and then later on, when they don't do what we want them to do, well, now they're our enemy, and we're concerned about them.
So that controversy on the border there brought about what change in the Dick Act?
The changes it brought about was the feds finally got the states to just agree that the feds can be in control of the state guard or the National Guard whenever they want to be.
And what year was that?
1916. They just
when did we go
to them.
When did we go to Europe? It was before them.
1917. And that was
really?
And that was part of the reason that the states were so willing, because everybody saw the war coming. That was at a time when you could see war coming down the road.
I mean, we're going to Europe. I mean, they do this and they go, now we can go. We're going to Europe.
The war in Europe began in 1914, and there had been people calling for America to get involved back then. And slowly it looked like we were finally going to get into it. Everybody thought it was right around the corner. So in 1916, look, we got to get our forces in order. We got to get ready to go to war. This is the environment in which all this was passed.
Okay, so we get to be involved in Europe, of all places, in World War I. What a joke. So anyway, so we go to World War I. After that, I mean, was there any need to consolidate forces from the states under the federal government more? Did they make other changes?
Well, one of the key provisions in the 1916 National Defense Act was that the feds were able to stipulate what kinds of units the states could form for the National Guard, because infantry is actually cheap to outfit and to stand to. It's also more prestigious because, infantry actually goes and walks over the enemy and plants the flag. So every state wanted to have infantry units. But a conquering international army, as we had envisioned, or our leaders had envisioned, needed, mechanized units, newly founded armor units, aircraft, and not everybody could be infantry. Well, the feds needed to stipulate who was going to have what. And then it became a game among the representatives in Washington. Well, our state wants this kind of unit, or we want this training ground over here. And it became a distribution of federal funds game.
Militarized. the progression of the United States being militarized, taking the power from the individual, giving it to the collective, and whenever individuals want to take it back, you're not allowed.